Tony Gunn, thanks for joining us.
Sure, anytime.
Would you like to take a few minutes to introduce yourself and tell us something about you and why you're running for office?
Sure. My name is Tony Gunn, obviously. Was born and raised in the South End down here. Big family of 7. We dealt with, like most families in the South End, we dealt with poverty pretty much my whole entire life. It was a struggle. Not as bad as some folks. I mean, we always managed to have a roof over our head, food on the table, things like that. But it was still a struggle, especially with a big family. It's, I don't know how my mom managed it, but she did. It's one of those things that all mothers like to, kind of deserve a medal or a, statue of some kind or something. So anyway, so after I went to Prince Charles, I went to King Edward. Before that, I went to graduated from St. John High. After that, I really kind of didn't really know. I was kind of unfocused. I didn't really know what kind of direction I wanted to go to. And when you're dealing with poverty the way we did, you kind of really, I know there's options out there, and I knew there was then, but in your mind, you feel like you're very limited in the things that are available to you. Nobody teaches you that, or they didn't when I was in school. They may now, but when I was in school, there was a guidance counselor, but they were monopolized by a majority of other people who didn't have the same needs I did, so to speak. There wasn't a lot of help for our area, for people from our area. So I just kind of went into the workforce. Didn't want to get struggled with debt. Didn't think my family could handle that. So I just started worked for basically a decade on jobs like that, until I was convinced to go back to school, that I had it in my ability to go to school. I was like, give it a shot now. Was nervous, obviously, and went to NBCC, took the business course, graduated, second in my class. And then even before I graduated, I already had a job that was paying twice as much as what I would have made regardless. I was pretty excited about that. Mm. And then worked at that for a little bit, and then got hired to a bigger company, and started to work my way up there. They paid for schooling, so I went back and got my degree from UBSJ, and that opened even more doors. So it's been a pretty good go of it for the last few years. And then now I'm here.
So what's it like campaigning in a COVID environment?
Man, campaign. I was not prepared for this sort of thing. I'm an accountant by trade.
Okay.
So basically accounting means that I'm terrible at sales. I'm not really a generic people person. I don't believe in confronting people and things like that. You know what I mean? Like trying to sell. I mean, because we're selling an idea, right? I mean, we're in sales. That's what politics is. You're in sales. You're selling an idea versus selling a good or a service. You're selling an idea, and it's kind of out of my comfort zone. Like if my comfort zone is St. John, I'm in like Belgium right now. So I mean that's how far out of it that I feel. Everybody says I'm doing okay, but you're your own worst critic, right? On how you're doing. So I've been trying to get out and talk to people, but as you know, the voter turnout in our areas, in our neighborhoods, isn't very high. Mm. So even just getting to talk to people on the streets, like, no, I don't vote, or I'm not interested, or it doesn't matter to me. You have to kind of breach that with people, and it's very difficult to do without having to talk to them.
I wanted to talk about voter turnout rates.
Turn this off, sorry.
Because the provincial rate generally has declined over the years,
yes.
From 82% in 1967 to 66% and change 2 years ago, mm-hmm. And the turnout rates in St. John Harbour are frankly the lowest in the province, so 49 constituencies. Do you have any thoughts, Tony, as to how that happens or how you can improve the turnout rate?
Yeah, I believe there's more than one issue going on with that.
Sure.
I believe a lot of it has to do with the makeup of the neighborhoods, the poverty that we deal with, the way that people feel that St. John is treated by Fredericton or by the people who run the province. They don't feel that St. John is any kind of priority or any kind of. They don't feel any. We're kind of like an island on our own on St. John, because we're a very industrial and port city. The rest of the province is more commercialized, is more social. You know, Fredericton has universities, Moncton has all the commercial hub, you know, the distribution centers, things like that. Where St. John, we've always been the port city. We've always been the industrial hub. I mean, was it not even 100 years ago, we were one of the industrial hubs of Canada. And you look at what's happening with Halifax now. Halifax has exploded in the last 20 years. You know, why hasn't St. John? You know, so the people in the neighborhood feel that it's just not going to make a difference. So you kind of, it's a tough subject when it comes to trying to make them understand that, no, your vote is going to make a difference. This time around, your vote is going to make a difference.
We canvassed a number of community organizations in the constituency, and we asked them to provide us some questions. So I have a couple that are based on the themes that they presented to us. And the first one, not surprisingly, is about poverty.
Right.
And we were told, and we know that poverty rates are persistently high in this riding. It was noted that minimum wages are low and only tied to inflation. Social assistance rates are very low in New Brunswick. Millions of dollars has been spent by the province in St. John since the 2015 election. So what do we have to do to get that rate down?
To me, education is, because for me, in my experience, education is the thing. I mean, there are a lot of ways to help people with poverty, to help them deal with it. You know, affordable housing, but higher social assistance rates, better minimum wage, you know, things like that. I mean, those are all options, but they only help you deal with poverty. They don't help you get out of poverty, and they don't. There's no golden ticket to getting out of poverty, but education is the first step. It's no secret that the more educated a person is, the higher salary they're going to bring in. I mean, it's not, you know, you're not reinventing the wheel or anything like that. Even me personally, the more education I got, the more opportunities that opened up for me. And that could be any kind of different education. For me, it was, you know, post-secondary education, community college, and the university. It could be training, it could be trades training, it could be virtual, anything. Even if you were not planning on going on, even education in high school when it comes to dealing with life after high school, with entering the job force, you know, with, you know, things like financial information, you know, how to balance your checkbook, how to understand where your money goes, how to understand taxes, economic things like knowing that, okay, if I did take 2 years to go to community college, I would be making this much more coming out of it in my lifetime. You know, I think the current information is based on high school education versus even just a community college. I think it's like 45% higher in your lifetime that you would make, assuming that minimum wage and things go up based on cost of living. Sure. And then obviously the more education you get, the higher that difference becomes. So for me, education is the main thing to get people out of poverty. Again, lots of ways to deal with poverty, but really the main way to get people out of poverty is just educating them on what's available to them.
Yeah. COVID, of course, was unanticipated, and nobody could have foreseen the impact and the effects that it had.
Right.
And it certainly magnified the issues that vulnerable populations face. Food security, isolation, mental health issues, precariously employed constituents raised the lack of paid sick leave as a concern. The opening of schools worries many parents. What's your plan to ensure that the issues highlighted by COVID are addressed?
Well, as you know, this is the first real health crisis of this century anyways. We have dealt with one in 101 years, I believe, you know. So it's probably something that nobody foresaw, but it probably should have been thought about at least. Overpopulation. I mean, obviously, population centers are getting huge. You know, you're dealing with millions and millions of people in a very, very small, contained area. I mean, for me, it was only a matter of time. I mean, I'm not a scaremonger or anything like that, but you know, dealing with it, I believe you need a focused strategy. You need planning ahead of time. You know, the Emergency Measures Act needs to be able to just step right in full who's running, no mixed messages. This is what we need to do. This is how we need to focus. This is where we need to get our attention. These are the people who are most vulnerable. Those are the people we need to make sure are safe regardless. Things like that. The mixed message thing is it really, one day you need a mask, next day you don't. One day touching things, you should never touch anything. The next day, touching is okay, but breathing isn't. It's a lot of things for just regular folks to deal with and not understand, and it puts more fear into them. And with seniors especially, quality of life is a big issue. Depression among seniors is very, very high, and it's much higher now that if you don't have that family support. So without family, like my mother had a stroke a couple of years ago, so her dealing with it is, she's not depressed or anything, but if we weren't allowed to visit her, I'm sure her health would probably not be as strong as it is now. But she lives at home. She's not at a senior's home like that. So I think it would be magnified if she was at a senior's home, where the visiting was cut down. I believe once a month, I believe, if it's not even that. And the economic factor, obviously, a lot of small businesses didn't survive. They don't have the capital to deal with this kind of situation, or if it ever happened again, you would see probably the exact same thing happen. So it needs to be a focus on a multi-tiered approach where keep the most vulnerable as safe as possible, make sure the businesses are taken care of so they can keep their employees available for work or at home if they don't feel safe. Just things like that. Like it's a very, very different environment than just last year. Obviously, just last year, it totally hit everybody by surprise. It's a tough thing to deal with.
Next question deals with health. New Brunswick has the second highest rate of disability in the country. Constituents raised concerns about mental health and addictions, wait times, access to a family physician. What would you do to improve health care generally and in the constituency in particular?
Now, healthcare is a big, big picture, and it's a big budgetary concern in New Brunswick. And as you know, our party has a specific focus on that, and that's the duality issue. And as far as I'm concerned, you can't really dig deep into the healthcare system until you deal with that issue on it, because there's a lot of funds tied up in the duality issue. Having the multiple health associations, with different ideals on how to, provide healthcare to its own area. Whereas if you had a focused New Brunswick, we have a small population. We're not even 1 million people. So if you have one agency focused on the entirety of New Brunswick, I think you could get a whole lot more done. And especially on a more localized issue, if it was more, let's say, in St. John, obviously we have a much more urban center. You have dealing with the poverty issue, dealing with drug use, which is more prevalent in urban areas, and you're dealing with depression, and suicide rates, which are astronomically high in some areas of high poverty. So obviously, you would need a much more focus on the mental health side of things, particularly in our areas. Whereas in a rural area, you may need more community involvement. You may need, more access to the actual healthcare providers rather than the mental health side. You need a more physical aspect of it. Health practitioners, more surgeons, more specialized roles, things like that. But you can't do that until you free up the funds to provide it, because there's a cost to everything. And right now, some of the cost we're paying double for. So if you eliminate that cost, it just provides so much more available funding to primary care.
Just 2 months ago in July, there were 89 individuals in St. John actively experiencing homelessness.
Right.
Men, women, old, young. Some constituents raise concerns about systems discharging people into homelessness, whether it's the health system or jails, provincial jails. What does the province need to do to end homelessness?
Now, with homelessness, there's the chronic homelessness and there's the transient homelessness.
Right.
Transient homelessness is a huge problem in our area, in urban areas or poor areas, where you have families having to leave their homes, either because they can't pay rent or because the owners decide that this isn't the area for you anymore. That we want, we see the area up and coming. We want to raise the rents. So, and family really has no options but to find someplace else. And as you know, it's not easy to find someplace else on short notice. So it's kind of a two-tiered approach. The chronic homelessness is there should always be a place available for somebody to go if they want to go. Plain and simple. I mean, it should be a human rights issue that there should be, whether it's a walk-in center, whether it's a church group. It could be, as long as there's some place for that person to go if they want to go. On the other side, whereas the transient homelessness, where they don't have a choice, they have to provide a roof for their family. There's no other option. So affordable housing obviously would be a key to that. You would need, as far as the South End goes, there's a lot of empty lots that are just empty lots. They're not productive of any kind. And so what we need is more investment in providing affordable housing, but until you do that, you kind of have to deal with the double tax issue. There's not going to be any new investment. People don't want to invest if their bottom line is too much. And so therefore they have to charge higher rents, and that eliminates obviously the lower income people from going in. So it's kind of a multi-tiered approach that once you deal with one thing and everything else should nicely fall into place. But until you deal with, bringing in the investment to allow the companies who want to build those multi-unit, properties on Germain Street or Prince William or things like that, they will do that with the city's help, and then also make a nice apartment building or a unit for affordable housing.
Question we're putting to all the Harbour candidates is a simple one, and it asks, do you support the proposal to build a new school in South End?
100%. Yeah. I spoke with Jeff over at Development St. John. I'm assuming all the other candidates did as well. And their proposal for the new community hub school project, they call it, that's fantastic. It's amazing. And it probably should be a pilot idea for any new school that is built in any kind of urban center in the province. It only makes sense to incorporate, health and wellness ideas into a school, because the schools generally are the hub of the community. It always was when I was in the South End Community Center. I practically lived there when I was a kid. So having health and wellness, having cafeteria available, libraries, technology centers. It's just a wonderful idea. I can't imagine it not being built within the next couple of years. As I went to both schools, I went to both Prince Charles and St. John the Baptist King Edward. Sorry. Am I used to talking so much? So anyways, so yeah, I went to both schools, and not that they were horrible schools or anything like that, but they're pretty much dated now. There's no opportunities to incorporate anything new into them. It's basically just a space. There's no. It's not well. I won't say it's not welcoming because it's a school, but it's just basically a brick and mortar space. Like a box store kind of thing. Whereas the new approach would be a community hub. You would have theater programs. You would have school sports programs. Pretty much the sky's the limit when it comes So I'm 100% in favor.
Any other issues you'd like to address or any final comments?
No, I mean, everybody know we're pretty much about common sense government, common sense ideas. We don't believe, with the minority government, we believe that it was working. With the majority government, St. John especially tends to get pushed to the side, all but forgotten, for the most part, until people start screaming. And unfortunately, only one voice. Our Harbour communities now it used to be there was two voices. It was separated by the north end was a separate constituency. Now you've got the five of the poorest neighborhoods in the province all in one riding. So it's a lot easier for the folks in Fredericton to ignore one person than two or three or several people pushing St. John in the same direction. So I'm all for St. John. I mean, I love New Brunswick, but I'm a St. Johner first. I'm a South Ender first. That's why I would be supporting it.
Well, Gunn, thank you very much.
Sure, anytime. It's a pleasure meeting you.